Austin, Texas. March 2026. The sun had barely risen over the city when something unusual began happening outside the massive glass convention halls of South by Southwest. Long lines stretched across sidewalks. Cameras clicked. Journalists whispered urgently into microphones. But the strange part? No concert was scheduled. No movie premiere. No product launch. And yet thousands of people had gathered for a single panel discussion. The topic? The economic power of one woman. Not a president. Not a CEO. Not even a tech billionaire. A singer. A songwriter. A cultural phenomenon. Taylor Swift. Inside the convention hall, a sign outside Ballroom D read, "The Taylor Swift Economy. Marketing, Culture, and the Billion-Dollar Blueprint." And what happened during that panel would shock even the most experienced economists in the room. Because as the speakers began presenting data, charts, and real-world impact, a realization slowly spread through the audience. This wasn't just about music. It was about power, a type of power rarely seen in modern culture, the kind that could move markets, transform entire cities, and rewrite the rules of marketing itself. But what the audience didn't know yet was that by the end of the panel, one expert would make a statement so bold, the entire room would fall silent. Because according to the numbers, Taylor Swift wasn't just influencing the economy. She was creating her own. But to understand how this happened, we need to go back, not to 2026, but to the moment the music industry first realized something unusual was happening. For decades, pop stars influenced culture. They sold records. They filled stadiums. They shaped fashion trends. But rarely did they move entire economies. Yet somehow, over the last few years, Taylor Swift had become something different. Cities reported massive tourism spikes whenever she performed. Airline bookings surged. Hotel prices doubled. Local businesses made record profits. Economists started using a new phrase, the Swift effect. And by the time the 2026 South by Southwest Festival arrived, curiosity had turned into full-scale academic fascination. Marketing professors were studying her release strategies. Economists were calculating her financial impact. Tech founders were analyzing her fan engagement tactics. Even political analysts were studying her influence, which is why that South by Southwest panel quickly became one of the most anticipated discussions of the entire festival. But no one expected just how deep the story would go. Because behind the headlines, behind the sold-out stadiums, behind the billions of streams, there was a carefully evolving blueprint. One that combined storytelling, psychology, marketing genius, and something even more powerful, trust. And on that warm Austin morning, a room full of experts were about to dissect it piece by piece. To understand why this panel mattered, you have to understand the scale of Taylor Swift's cultural footprint. By 2026, she had already achieved what many artists only dream about: multiple Grammy Awards, record-breaking album sales, the highest-grossing concert tour in history. But the numbers alone didn't explain the phenomenon. What fascinated economists wasn't just that she was successful. It was how her success spread outward, impacting industries far beyond music. Hotels, transportation, retail, streaming platforms, fashion. Even local governments began noticing patterns. Whenever Taylor Swift announced a tour date in a city, something extraordinary happened. Local economies surged. Restaurants filled up weeks in advance. Airbnb bookings skyrocketed. Merchandise sales flooded downtown shopping districts. And suddenly, one concert night became an entire economic weekend. Cities began preparing for what some officials jokingly called the Swift surge. But while fans saw magic, economists saw something else. A fascinating case study in modern influence economics. And that's exactly why South by Southwest decided to host the panel. The ballroom lights dimmed slightly as people filled every seat. Latecomers stood along the walls. Some even sat cross-legged on the floor. Journalists adjusted their cameras. Laptops opened. Coffee cups rested on notebooks. On stage sat 4 speakers: a marketing professor from Stanford, a cultural economist, a music industry strategist, and a venture capitalist who specialized in creator economies. Behind them, a giant screen displayed a symbol. Then the moderator leaned toward the microphone. "Let's start with a simple question," she said. "Why are we talking about a musician at a technology and business conference?" A quiet ripple of laughter moved through the room. Then the economist leaned forward and gave an answer that immediately grabbed everyone's attention. "Because," he said calmly, "Taylor Swift may be the most powerful marketer alive today." The room went silent, not because the statement sounded outrageous, but because everyone suddenly realized it might actually be true. The first slide appeared on the giant screen: tour revenue, streaming revenue, merchandise revenue, brand partnerships. Then the numbers expanded further: tourism spikes, hotel revenue, transportation demand, retail impact, local tax revenue. The economist pointed to a graph. "This," he said, "is the estimated economic impact of one single tour." The audience leaned forward. The number appeared on the screen: over $5 billion in economic activity. Gasps echoed across the ballroom. And that was just one tour. But the most surprising part wasn't the number itself. It was the pattern. Every city she visited experienced the same economic ripple effect. Like a stone dropped into water. Hotels filled. Airports crowded. Small businesses thrived. Taxi drivers earned more. Restaurants stayed open later. Even temporary jobs increased. One city official had even joked that hosting a Taylor Swift concert felt like hosting a mini Super Bowl weekend. But the panelists weren't interested in jokes. They wanted to understand why this kept happening. And the answer wasn't as simple as fame. Because plenty of artists were famous. But very few could trigger this kind of economic wave. Which meant something deeper was happening. Something psychological. Something cultural. Something strategic. And the next speaker was about to explain exactly what that was. The Stanford marketing professor adjusted his glasses and clicked to the next slide. Instead of charts, it showed something unexpected: fan interactions, online communities, storytelling patterns, release strategies. Taylor Swift, he began, is not just selling music. He paused. She's building worlds. The audience leaned closer. He explained how every album era created a unique narrative universe. Different aesthetics, different emotions, different symbols. Fans weren't just listening to songs. They were participating in stories, decoding clues, searching for hidden messages, connecting with other fans online. And over time, those fans evolved into something more powerful than listeners. They became a community, one that felt personally connected to the artist. And when people feel emotionally connected, their behavior changes. They travel further. They spend more. They engage more deeply. In marketing terms, this is called identity-based loyalty. But in Taylor Swift's case, it had evolved into something bigger, a global cultural movement. And that's when the venture capitalist on the panel leaned toward his microphone. Because he had a theory that would soon ignite the entire room. "What we're seeing," he said slowly, "is the rise of a creator-driven economy centered around a single individual." He paused, letting the words settle. "Think about it," he continued. "Taylor Swift isn't just releasing music. She's launching economic events. Concerts, album releases, merchandise drops, special edition vinyl, limited time experiences. Every one of those moments triggers massive consumer activity. And because her fans trust her, they show up every single time." He gestured toward the screen. "Most companies spend billions trying to build this kind of loyalty. But she's built it organically over years of storytelling." The moderator leaned forward. "So what you're saying?" He nodded. "Yes. Taylor Swift may be the most successful direct-to-consumer brand in entertainment history." A murmur spread across the room. because suddenly the idea didn't sound like celebrity analysis anymore. It sounded like business strategy. But the biggest surprise of the panel hadn't even happened yet, because one final piece of data was about to change how everyone in the room understood the story. And when it appeared on the screen, even the panelists looked stunned. The final speaker, the music industry strategist, clicked to the last slide. Instead of economics, it showed something different. Global fan demographics, age groups, countries, languages, online engagement patterns. Here's what makes Taylor Swift unique, she said. She doesn't just reach fans. She grows with them. Fans who started listening as teenagers were now adults. Some were parents. Some were entrepreneurs. Some worked in media, technology, politics. And many of them still felt deeply connected to the music, which meant something unusual was happening. Her audience wasn't shrinking over time. It was expanding across generations. And that meant her influence wasn't temporary. It was structural. The strategist leaned closer to the microphone. If this continues, she said, we're not just studying a pop star. We're studying a long-term cultural institution. The room grew quiet, because suddenly the conversation wasn't about concerts anymore. It was about legacy. But then, one economist in the audience raised his hand and asked a question that would change the entire direction of the panel. What happens, he asked, when an individual becomes powerful enough to influence markets? The moderator hesitated, because the answer to that question was far more complicated than anyone expected. And the discussion that followed would reveal something even more shocking about the modern entertainment industry. Something that proved the Taylor Swift phenomenon was bigger than music, bigger than marketing, and possibly bigger than anyone realized.